Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, or from whatever time zone you might be calling us in from today. We appreciate you joining and we thank you. My name is Rebecca Cronin, and I'm one of the customer success managers here with the Altair Data Analytics team. The customer success team are here as another point of contact for you to reach out to at any time with any questions or concerns you may have regarding Altair solutions, or if you're unable to get a hold of your account manager. We are very excited that you're joining us today for our Ask the Expert series. Our goal is to be able to provide you an open time slot where you may freely drop in, and we'll do our very best to provide any assistance in answering any and all of your questions after we demonstrate our starting topic. So in just a few minutes, we'll begin. But before we do, let me provide some little housekeeping. So in your control panel, probably on the right side, you'll see a handout section. It is a copy of today's PowerPoint that you may download. Within this PowerPoint, there's a list of helpful web links to some of the resources that are available for you, as well as some upcoming events. You'll also notice in that control panel, there is a question, or it may be called a chat section, where you can freely type in the question that you may have for our expert. Note, it does not have to be about today's topic. It could be anything related around AI Studio and AI Hub. We'll do our best to get to the question today, and if we're unable to, please allow us between 2 to 5 business days, so we'll get back to you offline. So again, I'd like to now get started and introduce our expert. It's Jeff Chowaniec. He's one of our senior data scientists. He has worked for almost 10 years in various technical support roles, included that Altair RapidMiner team. He's one of our original specialists, and we're fortunate to have his expertise. He leads by example, providing tremendous assistance to both our customers and our own internal teams. Some of you may have even had the benefit of working with Jeff. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn presenter over to Jeff, where we'll dive into our topic covering transforming data for visualization. So let's make you presenter, Jeff. All right, we see an AI Studio client interface.
Perfect. All right, let me go. I want this guy right here. Okay, so last session, we took a look at how to use generative AI. Specifically, I was pulling a bunch of articles and extracting some data out of them via a series of different methods. So using the generative AI summary model, using a zero-shot classification to pull out renewable types, what technology we're talking about, and what type of policy are we dealing with? Laws, bills, regulations, etc. Then I use some basic text extraction to pull out what agencies we might be looking at, what companies there are, etc. So we last session took a look at how to use generative AI and a little bit of text mining to pull out these different fields from a list of URLs. So we used a lot in that session in order to get this information out. Now let's talk about how we can turn this into something useful. So I have this article text here. I've got all of these fields over here. And if I want to maybe build a report, I'm going to need to build some visualizations. That end product might look something like these two charts here. I have just a pie chart for the distribution of my agencies that I found in my articles. And I also have a word list or a word cloud here. So I can see, hey, what words are showing up in these articles that I'm extracting. I could build any number of visualizations. I'm not limited to these. I'm just using these as a good example. There is also another extension that I'm leveraging. So we used a few extensions last time around just to refresh in order to add new sets of operators. In particular, I'm going to be using this plot data operator. This specifically comes from, if I search for this operator, comes from the extension animated plots. So if I go up to extensions and go to marketplace updates and extensions, if I just go ahead and search plot, I should see a handful of options, one of which I use all the time, which is this operator toolbox. And then there's this animated plots option, which allow me to store plot configurations from my results view and apply them like this plot data operator is doing in my workflow. So utilizing that animated plots extension, we're basically going to go from this data to these visualizations. Now, there are a couple of other operators that are helpful to us in this case because our data isn't necessarily, I can't just deliver this text and say, give me word cloud. I can't deliver this agency list and say, build me a pie chart. What I have to do is I have to turn this data into something useful. So let's start with our word cloud. So I'm going to generate a word cloud for all of my articles. I have a sub process here that I am going to quickly enable and send some data into. Inside this word cloud, what I really need to get to is I need to get to a data set. So if I do a breakpoint after this filter example range, I need to get to a data set that shows me the word in my word cloud that I want to visualize, how many documents it shows up in, and how many times that word shows up in total. So I need to take this, and I can take any number of this top list and visualize it into a word cloud output. But in order to go from our raw document text to this data, what I'll have to do is run it through my process documents operator. I'm not going to take this time to show, I really want to show off the taking our data and visualizing it. So I'm going to not dive into how we manage to structure that text data into something useful, but I will show off these operators and their outputs. So ultimately what I'm doing is just building a really quick process documents from data. This is also coming from our text mining extension. So I'm using an extra extension in here. Actually, I can just show my managed extensions in here. So that text processing extension, if you're already leveraging the operator toolbox, it is a dependency for this operator toolbox, but otherwise I'd have to install that separately. In here, I've got this process documents from data. And inside of this, I do a lot of stuff. Like I tell it, hey, tokenize on non-letters, transform cases. And the end result of this, I'll show you kind of a breakdown of what it's doing for me as we go. So if I run this, it breaks down my text. So here's my raw text down below. The alternating colors tells us, hey, what words did we find? The next workflow turns everything to lowercase letters. So that way capital the and lowercase the aren't the same word, aren't two different words. I have a stop words list, so it just takes the out for me anyway. And then I've got another custom stop words list that I'm running to take more words I don't care about. And then there's a few other operators to remove errant tokens and generate n-grams. So the last step allows me to generate combinations of words. From there, my end result generates a really big word list that I turn into a data set. So when I run this, it text mines this. I have 6,000 or 9,060 words I've extracted. And if I sort by total, I can get the list of words that show up the most often. From there, I could, for example, go into visualizations and attempt a word cloud, but my word cloud has a limit of 500 distinct values. So what I throw in there is just a filter example range. I say, hey, I only need the top 50 words. So if I sort this word cloud by total descending, which is what I did here, I just want to say, hey, start at row 1, go to row 50, and take those top 50 words. So that's what my filter example range does. Goes from row 1, goes from 50, and it gets me this output here. So if I run this, I now just have my top 50 words. If I go into visualizations now, it will build this word cloud for me, which is great. It actually knows what's cool is if I had a different data set, I might default to a line chart or a bubble chart, depending on the data type in my data set. Here, it actually has word cloud already selected. It actually, as a part of the workflow, will remember what chart we might be displaying at this output port. So that's one thing that RapidMiner already does for us. It will remember this chart for us. This is important because we want to reproduce this chart anytime we rerun this workflow. The nice thing is this EXA output will always produce this chart for us, which is good. But what I could do is go to this option here and say export this chart as a PNG, and I could save this. I could save this just as an image file and pull that out, which is helpful. But what I could also do in this same export is export the JSON of this chart. Chart configs. Yeah. So in here, sorry, I need to check my notes for a second. And go to webinar is in the way. Saving that basically all articles repository. So we're going to save that configuration. I have it actually saved in my chart configs, so you can see a handful of configurations over here. That configuration should be in here. Perfect. So I'm going to jump down to the save button. And you can see that I can save this chart configuration as a JSON file. I've already done that in this chart configs file, so you can see the different JSON files I have for the different charts. So in this case, I'm actually generating this all articles word cloud. So I've stored the output after this EXA in my chart config folder. And then what I do is just open that chart config. So I say, hey, open this all articles word cloud.json. And then my plot data operator expects two inputs: the data that I'm delivering and a chart configuration I want to read from. That's why I've got this chart configs folder. And what this does is it produces this chart for me. And I can write this out as a file. So you might be saying, okay, well, if you're doing this and writing out this file, what's stopping you from just coming here and just saving this file? This is great. If I only need to generate this chart once, I could totally do this manually. But the nice part about this is, let's say instead of just charting this result, I wanted to go here and say, okay, well, what if we also built a word cloud for each renewable type? Since there's articles for each renewable type, maybe I want to generate a word cloud for each of them. So now, if I'm going to just disable this and send the data into this word cloud renewable type, it's largely the same workflow, but this time I'm looping over renewable type. So then I come in here and I say, hey, filter on renewable type, do run the same text mining process, build that same 1 to 50, and design me a chart. So the cool part about this, if I do a breakpoint after, is I will generate a chart. So this shows me a preview of the file for each renewable. So the first one is solar. I can't remember. I can actually see what it is. It's power plant for the second one. So now I've basically taken that chart generation and automated it for my different renewal types. And I could do this for any of the other fields I have in my data set, but I'm reusing this renewable word cloud JSON configuration that I built, so I can save all of these charts. My right file that's in here is actually saving these charts in this folder for me. So it's generating that hydro, etc. So this was the first part that I wanted to highlight, was transforming data and then leveraging the plot data operator from the animated plots extension to be able to store these visualizations on command. Because now I can easily go in and say, okay, here's the hydropower word cloud, here's the solar power word cloud, here's, I think I've got 2 of those, I don't know why. Here's the thermal power word cloud. So the nice thing is I can just run this and generate a word cloud for anything that I need, as long as it uses that same chart config. Now, I also use this same methodology to generate my pie chart. The only difference is I'm not working with text data, and I have to go from this data here, which is my agency, where I've got multiple agencies per article in some cases. And I need to go from this to data I can accurately plug into a pie chart. So if I go into visualizations here and go to pie/donuts, and this will give me renewable type, which is helpful for all of my articles. But if I jump over to, which is it? I'm looking at agency. Yeah, I'm looking at agency in here. I don't want to aggregate data. This pie only supports nominal value type if aggregation is enabled. So if I go to aggregate data, I want to select agency here. So you'll see this big distribution where it'll give me these combinations that I had in my data. And I need to break this data up, right? I need to have one input per article per agency, basically, so I can sum these up and fill them out. So the nice thing is I have all of the tools kind of already in the base of RapidMiner. And this was like the second fold. One was how to do the plotting in general. And the other is to use a couple of operators to break up my data. There's a handful of operators I like to teach because I use them a lot. And it's important to know how to leverage them. So the first thing that I do, I'm doing the same loop here. So if I send this data in, or actually, no, I might not be looping. Multiplies going in, agency distributions here. Oh no, I'm looping up above. Okay, cool. So the first thing that I do, I just select the data I care about, which is our renewable type. I keep the URL in there kind of as an ID, and my agency, because I want to look at the agency pie chart distribution for the different renewable types. And so what I need to do is split these values. So there's a cool split operator where I select agency, I select the split pattern, which is that vertical pipe, and then just do an ordered split. So then I get this output here, where I'll have a number of columns based on the total, the maximum number of agencies found. So you can see I've got agency 1, agency 2, agency 3, somewhere in here I'll have agency 4. If there was a 5th one, I'd get agency 5, etc. So I get a column per number of agencies found in that row with missing values saying, okay, we only found state government for this one, we only found EPA for this one, we only found FERC for this one, and so on. This is great because then I could throw this into a dpivot operator. So I could say, hey, create a column called agency and do agency.plus. So that'll grab agency 1, 2, 3, and 4 and dpivot those columns for me. And then I just index this by agency number. So my end result of the dpivot is I get this nice data set where I have my URL, my renewable type for the article, and then agency number. So I can see, hey, this was the first agency found for that article. This was the first agency found for that article. This was the first, second, and third agency found for this article here, which is great because now all I need to do is send this into an aggregate operator where I can say, hey, count the agency by agency and renewable type. So my end result, if I run this, gives me this list. So now I have by renewable type and agency, or by renewable type, the count of that agency calculated for me, which is great. So this is one part of that transformation, because now I could go into that visualization. I'd be able to make this chart a little easier. I'm almost there. I need to filter on those counts. So if I go into this loop values, I do the same thing. I say filter on renewable type, call my stored plot config. So that's my open file that's in here. So I point at that chart config. So this is going to be my agency pie chart right here. And then I go to run my plot data. So what this does for me, if I do a breakpoint after this and run this, it will grab each one of these distributions. So it shows my solar power agency distribution, and then it will run the same generate plot for my power plant, for my thermal power agency distribution, and so on. So in this loop, I'm able to generate each of those plots for me with the help of 3 really useful operators: my split operator, my dpivot operator to transform the data so I can count it, and then my aggregate operator handles all the counting for me. And then down below, I basically have what's happening in this loop. So I just count agency for all articles and then plot that. So this has its own agency all distribution config, and then that is actually what's generating this agency distribution for renewables articles. So this operator, this write file, generates this pie chart for me. The cool part about all of these configs is if I go here, for example, show example set result. If I jump into visualizations, it defaults to the pie chart because it has that configuration stored. But the nice part about all of this, that JSON config that I save handles everything from the legend. If I want it showing, I can give a title to that legend, or I can throw a title onto this. And you'll notice I have this, I must have closed my pie chart, didn't I? I have this already set to agency distribution for renewable articles, so I could easily plug that in. But the nice thing is my JSON configuration already has that stored. But I do have the capability of changing, of adding in more detail to these charts in the plot config. I could do a whole Ask the Expert series just on the charting. And this is largely, I don't really use this a lot for kind of like you're creating the visualizations for a dashboard or something like that. But all of the tools, all of the operators I'm using to transform this data to get it into this plot format are useful, because this is what I actually use to structure the data and pipe it into Altair's Panopticon when I'm dashboarding. The cool part about AI Studio and the AI Hub is that I can take the workflows I build here. Like, let's say I needed to pipe this data in to have these pie charts on a dashboard. So instead of generating the plots themselves, I could replicate this workflow that runs this loop to select the data I need and generate the data sets I need to build these pie charts in Pano. So I can build the same workflow to generate the data, but not actually make the visualization, expose it as an endpoint on the AI Hub, and use that endpoint as a data source in Panopticon, and I could have this in there, which means that those charts can also be dynamic. So I could add in a menu to select what renewable type I want to generate the pie chart for. So I could make it so it's a bi-directional connection to the dashboard. So on the dashboard, I could say, select the renewable type, and it will send that information to the workflow, run it, and my workflow will generate the data for that renewable type. So if I deliver solar power, it will select the data to generate the pie chart for solar power. So ultimately, this is one way to generate charts. Most of the time, I'm using the workflows that I'm building here as deployable endpoints on the AI Hub to connect into Pano. But you can also use them for generating charts, like I'm doing here. But this charting isn't really meant to replace data visualization applications. I use it a lot more on the kind of data exploration and data cleansing part of like the crisp VM cycle in the use cases that I work on. So I like to use this more for data exploration rather than reporting, but I do have the option via the animated plots to generate these plots. Really helpful for stuff like prediction curves, where maybe I'm building, making a prediction and I want to plot actuals versus predicted, so I can see if I'm on that y equals x line. Helpful for generating plots like that, and quickly exporting them via the plot data operator. So big things I wanted to touch on. There are some cool data preparation operators I would familiarize myself with, like the split, the dpivot, the aggregate, the regular pivot operator. I use them pretty consistently to basically get data into a format via which I can build charts for. So that's one big component. Stuff like our certain visualizations require certain data types. Like if I go into visualizations here and I select my word cloud, I do need to have structured the data via text processing in order to get to the word list, which helps me generate the word cloud here. You can import a word list. So like if the text mining's already been done, I can import that data and just plot the word cloud. But I wanted to show how to generate that data in AI Studio in order to be able to build that visualization. But there are tons of other visualizations in here, depending on what I want to chart, whether it's histogram, bell curves, line charts, scatter plots, etc., all of which I've used for helpful data exploration purposes in this charts view. Yeah, and so the last bit of this, the last thing I'm touching on, we also used a few loops and macros and stuff, and I could also run an entire webinar on how to loop properly as well. So there's a lot of cool stuff, but the main takeaways are cool operators for transforming data for the purposes of visualization and the ability to produce plots and automate the production of those plots. So I can use that via the plot data and the write file operator to write out visualizations as I need them. Helpful in a loop if I need to make a bunch of different variations of the same plot, like my word list or my pie chart in that case. So being able to run them in a loop and generate a bunch of visualizations is really helpful. And storing any of the remembered chart configs from an operator is as simple as going to the save button and saving that JSON, and then we can call that JSON object in our workflows as an input to our plot data. So we can use the same structure for every plot we have in a loop, for example. So pretty helpful stuff. I wanted to touch on this just because I've been using it a lot lately with clients, and as a helpful PSA, I think it's useful for the community to know that these tools exist in AI Studio, and maybe have a little bit of a crash course on how to use them. Oftentimes I'm picking topics or proposing topics for this webinar that are effectively topics that I see coming up a lot when I'm working directly with clients, and they're just helpful tips and tricks that I see clients coming to me saying, hey, how do I do this in AI Studio? So I like presenting that. And this one here today is one that has come up a lot recently, at least in terms of like turning data into helpful visualizations and automating the production of those visualizations into charts like this that I can store via JPEG, dump into a report, an email, etc. Yeah, that was it. I think I'm happy to turn it over. I know we have 30 minutes for the call. I'm happy to turn it over for any questions. If you guys have questions for what I've shown Or if there's something you're working on personally that you want to ask a question on or propose a topic for, we're happy to feedback and questions for the remainder of our time.
So Jeff, I have a silly question. You said that how you could use those charts to, attach to like an email or document to share. So how would you export that out? Or is that because you saved it?
Yeah, so here in this case, I've just saved them as, I can't remember if I wrote them as JPEGs. I did, I wrote them as JPEGs. So like I could just drag this into an email. But let's say for the sake that I have kind of an automated process that's using this plot data to generate a chart. And let's say this triggers on an alert. I don't know what that alert could be. It could be we have a process that applies our model to predict I don't know unplanned downtime in a manufacturing machine, what have you. So we get an alert because it proposed it like, hey, we're predicting an issue. And then what we want to do is just generate some chart that shows us, hey, what's currently going on in the known signals that we look for in our workflow, right? So we generate that chart and want to store it. So instead of storing it, what you could also do is actually just drop in a send mail operator that requires a little bit of extra configuration to make sure it's sending to the right stuff, but I could just do a send mail and attach this file as an attachment. So I can say there, so it will attach that visualization as an attachment. And then I could set up the sender info to subject, throw in the body of the email. And then if I have to put multiple attachments in, because I'm generating all of these different images, I could pipe each image in as its own object to send into the send mail. So I could have this running on a trigger that says, okay, if we get a prediction of downtime, generate charts for the sensors data / KPIs we look for that can cause problems, and then email those charts out. So we can just have someone quickly look at it. So we could leverage the send mail to send this stuff out. Otherwise, I am just writing them as files, so you'll just have them in a repository. If AI Studio has access to like a network shared drive, they could also be going directly into there via that write file operator. Obviously, that requires some setup on the org side, but there's a lot of creative ways you can get these visualizations out to folks, including the send mail operator.
Thank you. So for those online, if there's any questions you have, again, it doesn't have to be about today's topic. Any other questions, issues you might be trying to work out on, we'll do our best to answer. You could raise your hand, we can give you the mic, or you can type it in that question panel. If there's not a question, what I could do right now is, while we have the attendees, I can launch our poll question to vote on what topic we'd like to learn about for next session. So let me go ahead and do that. So if you happen to have your screen at full view, you may have to minimize in order to select your voting topic. So we have our choices for model optimization / hyperparameter tuning. We have the feature selection options to go over, or we can select joining data sets by date time. And then we have the other. So the way the other works is, when this webinar ends, we do have an automatic little survey that will pop out and get sent to you for some feedback. Let us know how we're doing. And will be a question where it says, if you selected other, please suggest your idea. So obviously we may not be able to cover that topic next session, but we'll have it on the voting block for our future session. So Looks like we're about a third of the way there for voting. And so we'll do a countdown. You'll notice that you'll only be able to select one choice. We'll do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So our popular vote was joining data sets by date and time. So that's what we'll cover for our next session. All right, so again, in the attached handout section is a copy of this PowerPoint. So just to point out, we had our user community support portal had an update. We had a merger of our Altair with our former RapidMiner organization to now a single user community site. So the old RapidMiner community and the Altair are now this one solo combined Altair user community. The customer support link portal has been categorized as such, so please download that copy so you can get these new web links. The documentation for RapidMiner the Academy is still the same. Our Ask the Expert series, we'll have that again. Certification, this is all continued to be the same. So this is what that new user community support portal looks like. When you come in here, you'll see the option where you can ask the community or go in and create a case with the team. And this is our new look and feel for our combined user community site. So it's broken down. If you go into discussions, I didn't get a screenshot of that, but in discussions, you'll see our RapidMiner product line with our HyperWork product line. You'll see the different former groups kind of been grouped together as a business topic. Documentation, as I mentioned, still remains the same. In that location, some of our little headings have been minimized as we've consolidated. As I shared, Academy still continues the same. Our Learn access from our support portal is under this little menu here. So then, of course, when you search the content, you'll be able to see those courses, but as well as you have the Academy. Marketplace, as well as you can get here to get the latest clients, right, and search for the data analyst product line and our AI Studio. Upcoming event, our next Ask the Expert session will be on December 11th, same time, with that new category of joining those data sets by date time. So that's all I have. And so again, I could stop and give presenter back to Jeff. So in case there's any questions that the audience has. We do have like 15 minutes, so I give you the chance to ask anything. If you can't think of anything, we'll just kind of hang in. Unless there's a little tip or trick, Jeff, that might be a continuation of this topic.
I don't know. There are just so many operators to cover for this. I think the big ones are the aggregate, the deep pivot, and pivot. Learning how to use those effectively for transforming data is a really good skill.
So that being said, where would you learn that kind of stuff? Would that be within the Academy or?
So you can always learn by doing. So like if I select an operator, best way is like if I go in here, where do I need to do this? I need to do it down here, and select like the deep pivot operator. And if I have the help window open, I can always jump to tutorial process. So this will actually I'm going to give this a save since I've been playing around with it. But if I jump into this, it'll just select a data set that I can run the dpivot operator. So this is like the easiest way to like, okay, this is what my data looks like. This is what it looks like after I pivot, after I run the dpivot. So how did they get to that? And then I go select my dpivot, go into the parameters and say, okay, well, here's what I did to dpivot this data, etc. So this is the easiest place to start, is just by grabbing that jump to tutorial process on the operator I want to learn about. From there, you could grab your own data and try that operator. Like I said, learning by doing is the best. If you want a little bit more explanation and kind of a deeper meaning, always check out the Academy for videos on specific topics. Like the course on data transformation covers stuff like pivoting, depivoting, and all that good stuff that we're using to build that, to build those visualizations. So those are kind of the best places to go. I think a lot of times if I am working on a new operator, most of the time it's from our extensions. So if I go to plot data, it might be hit or miss if there's a tutorial process in extensions, but you can see I can drop in the plot data operator and there's this jump to tutorial process, and I can go and learn how to use this plot data operator. So if I run this, it builds that plot for me. So it is easy to learn new operators as well. So if I grab an extension and need to understand, hey, how exactly does this operator work? Generally, they'll have a tutorial process that you can access. Not all operators and extensions do, and not all extensions generate the workflows for the tutorial processes, but that's a good place to start, especially if you're leveraging a lot of extensions that might not be covered on the Academy.
All right, it sounds great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful remaining of your day and your week. Thank you, Jeff. Great job.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Take care. Have a great week, everybody.